The suffocating silence of the Aspen Villa dining room pressed against me, while 50 relatives stared in anticipation. My name is Lydia, and I am 31 years old, facing a completely coordinated family ambush. My husband Derek aggressively slid an $85,000 tuition guarantor contract across the table, while his sister Fiona sat opposite me, wearing a smugly expectant expression. Derek's parents, Arthur and Martha, stood nearby with crossed arms to create an overwhelming wall of psychological pressure. "Just sign it. You make the most money in this house," Derek demanded loudly enough for every guest to hear. I kept my hands firmly in my lap and completely refused to touch the pen. Seeing my defiance, Arthur suddenly grabbed my dinner plate and violently hurled the entire meal into the nearby trash receptacle. The loud sound of shattering porcelain violently cut through the extremely quiet room before Arthur roughly pulled my chair backward. "Sign it or get out of this house forever," he ordered while pointing directly at the heavy front door. I calmly stood up from the table, buttoned my winter coat, and looked directly into my husband's eyes. I delivered one single sharp sentence that instantly drained the color from their faces and left the room paralyzed. Before I reveal the exact words that left them completely speechless and how I dismantled their fraudulent scheme 1 week later, please drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from today. I am truly curious to see how far this story of family betrayal travels around the internet. What I actually told them was that they should probably check the validity of their secretly forged applications before threatening the only person keeping them out of federal prison. The heavy slam of the front door instantly severed the chaotic noise of the dining room and returned the freezing winter silence. I walked briskly toward my parked vehicle while pulling my coat tighter against the biting wind to physically distance myself from the toxic environment I had just escaped. Once securely inside the driver's seat, I immediately inserted the key into the ignition to blast the heater and focused entirely on regulating my erratic breathing after surviving such an aggressive public humiliation. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel tightly enough to turn my knuckles white as I processed the sheer audacity of Arthur demanding my financial servitude in front of 50 relatives. Before I could even shift the car into gear, my mobile phone suddenly illuminated the dark interior of the cabin with an urgent notification from my secure credit monitoring application. The bold text across the lock screen warned me about a critical status update regarding a high-tier student financial aid application that had just been flagged by the system. I stared at the glowing rectangle in absolute disbelief because I had never initiated any educational funding requests or co-signed any academic loans for anyone in my entire life. A cold wave of dread washed over me as I quickly unlocked the device using my biometric scanner to access the secured financial portal and uncover the source of this terrifying alert. Navigating through the encrypted dashboard revealed a sickening truth that completely shattered any remaining illusions I held about my marriage. Someone had actively utilized my personal social security number to establish a massive private tuition loan profile exactly 1 week prior to this disastrous holiday gathering. The digital footprints clearly indicated that the application was entirely finalized on their end, but remained suspended in a pending status, because the university's strict compliance department required a physical wet signature to verify the guarantor's identity. They had meticulously filled out my employment history and annual income bracket to secure the absolute maximum borrowing limit for Fiona, without ever uttering a single word of this to me. The horrifying realization hit me with the force of a physical blow as the pieces of their elaborate theatrical performance finally snapped into place. The orchestrated dinner ambush where Derek pushed that notarized document across the table was never about asking me to generously fund a new educational endeavor for his sibling. They had already committed federal identity theft behind my back and desperately needed my authentic signature tonight to legally sanitize the fraudulent paperwork before the university fraud department investigated the discrepancy. Arthur threatening to throw me out of the house was merely a desperate tactic to force my immediate compliance before I could discover they had already stolen my financial identity. Pure adrenaline replaced my initial shock as the compliance analyst inside me took complete control of the escalating crisis to prevent any further catastrophic damage. I bypassed the initial alert screen and immediately navigated to the emergency security protocols within my financial management application to initiate a comprehensive lockdown. With a few deliberate keystrokes, I placed a permanent security freeze on all 3 core credit reporting bureaus to ensure absolutely no institution could authorize another cent under my name. I meticulously saved screenshots of the forged loan application details and forwarded the entire digital trail to a secure encrypted folder that only I could access for future legal proceedings. Knowing my financial identity was temporarily secure from their grasping hands gave me the precise clarity needed to execute my next move. I shifted the transmission into drive and pressed the accelerator to carefully navigate the vehicle down the snow-covered driveway away from the opulent Aspen property. Watching the brightly lit windows of the villa fade into the rearview mirror felt like watching the final remnants of my marriage dissolve into the dark winter night. I drove toward the highway with a terrifying calmness because I had permanently discarded every ounce of respect I ever held for Derek and recognized that my survival required complete ruthlessness. The following morning began with the relentless ringing of my mobile phone, shattering the fragile silence of my temporary hotel room. Derek was calling repeatedly with an aggressive sense of entitlement, as if the previous night had merely been a minor disagreement. He left multiple voicemails adopting a commanding tone to demand that I immediately drive back to Aspen to apologize to his parents. His messages escalated from arrogant orders to explicit threats of divorce if I failed to return and finalize the guarantor paperwork for Fiona. He completely underestimated my resolve by assuming his typical manipulation tactics would force my compliance just like they always had in the past. Instead of collapsing under his intense psychological pressure, I firmly muted his notifications and quickly gathered my printed documents to initiate my definitive counterstrike. As I walked purposefully toward my vehicle parked outside the hotel, my phone screen illuminated again with another incoming call from Derek. I deliberately decided to answer this specific attempt to clearly establish my absolute boundaries before permanently severing our communication channels. "What the hell are you doing because Fiona's application is suspended since you froze your credit?" Derek yelled into the receiver with unmistakable panic. "I am fixing your mistakes, so you better brace yourself." I replied with chilling calmness before abruptly terminating the connection without waiting for his response. Navigating directly to the local police precinct became my singular focus to ensure their fraudulent actions were documented by law enforcement authorities. The sterile environment of the station provided a stark contrast to the opulent luxury of the villa where they had tried to extort me. I sat patiently across from a seasoned financial crimes investigator and methodically presented the comprehensive digital evidence proving my identity had been compromised. Handing over the printed screenshots of the unauthorized loan application, along with the network routing logs, verified the origin of the digital forgery. The detective scrutinized the documents carefully before officially categorizing the situation as a severe case of federal identity theft, orchestrated by Derek. Filing a formal police report against Derek felt surreal, but it was absolutely necessary to protect myself from the catastrophic debt they attempted to manifest. The investigator finalized the documentation and provided me with an official case number that would serve as my ultimate shield against their predatory financial tactics. Securing that vital piece of paper transformed my lingering anxiety into a cold determination to dismantle every single resource they had historically exploited. Leaving the precinct, I drove straight to the main branch of my primary financial institution to execute the next phase of my permanent separation. My objective was completely clear because I needed to sever the financial arteries that Derek and his family had comfortably fed upon throughout our marriage. Approaching the bank manager with absolute certainty, I requested an immediate withdrawal of exactly 50% of the liquid assets held within our joint accounts. Taking only my precise legal share was a strategic decision to ensure my actions remained unassailable during any future divorce litigation while crippling his spending power. The teller efficiently processed the massive transaction and transferred the substantial funds directly into a newly established private account, completely shielded from his access. Watching the available balance on our shared account plummet to a fraction of its former glory delivered an immensely satisfying sense of genuine justice. By securing those funds, I effectively eliminated the financial safety net that allowed Derek to blindly support the extravagant lifestyle of Arthur and Martha. He would now be forced to face the harsh reality of his own financial incompetence without relying on my professional salary to subsidize his family. Stepping out of the bank building, I felt lighter than I had in years because I had successfully reclaimed absolute control over my own resources. There was no room left for negotiation or reconciliation, since they had permanently destroyed my trust through their incredibly deceitful financial actions. 2 days later, a hesitant knock echoed through the quiet hallway outside my temporary apartment door. I cautiously peered through the security peephole to find Derek's Aunt Helen standing there with absolute terror etched across her usually composed face, while aggressively clutching a thick stack of printed bank transfer receipts. Opening the wooden door revealed her visibly trembling hands grasping those financial papers like a desperate lifeline, while her eyes darted around nervously. Helen stepped inside the living room without waiting for a formal invitation to urgently explain the catastrophic financial situation rapidly unfolding within their extended social circle. She nervously revealed how Arthur and Martha had systematically contacted dozens of elderly family members over the past 3 months to solicit massive financial contributions. They had deceitfully marketed this aggressive collection effort as a prestigious family scholarship fund, specifically designed to guarantee a premium university education for Fiona. The truly sickening part of their elaborate presentation was the completely fabricated guarantee that I had legally committed to matching every single dollar they successfully raised. They weaponized my successful corporate career to build a facade of absolute financial security that easily convinced the older relatives to part with their savings. Lydia Arthur explicitly told us you promised to match the exact amount we contributed, so why are you pulling out at the absolute last minute? Helen asked with a voice cracking from overwhelming stress. I never made any such promise because you and everyone else have been thoroughly scammed by your own biological brother, I replied while maintaining steady eye contact to convey my absolute sincerity. Hearing those blunt words caused the remaining color to completely drain from her face as she heavily collapsed onto the nearest fabric chair. Instead of offering empty verbal reassurances, I immediately retrieved my personal laptop from the kitchen counter to provide undeniable digital proof of their criminal deception. I positioned the glowing screen directly in front of her trembling hands to display the official credit monitoring dashboard highlighting my recently enacted security freezes. I meticulously walked her through the exact timestamps proving I had never authorized any joint educational accounts or approved any matching corporate funds for anyone. Pulling up my pristine banking history further demonstrated 0 outbound transfers directed toward any educational trusts associated with that deceptive family. Tears began streaming down her wrinkled cheeks as the devastating reality of the situation finally pierced through her stubborn familial loyalty. Helen confessed that she had personally transferred a significant portion of her fixed retirement income into a private checking account entirely controlled by Martha. She suddenly realized those substantial pooled funds were never deposited into any legitimate university financial department, but were instead actively funding their luxurious lifestyle. The profound betrayal of knowing her own brother had weaponized her generosity to finance their superficial social status in Aspen completely broke her spirit. Those stolen contributions were likely paying for their expensive holiday catering, while Fiona remained entirely unqualified for that specific academic institution. Watching an older woman weep over stolen retirement funds ignited a renewed sense of cold fury within me toward the people I once considered family. Refusing to let her wallow in passive victimhood prompted me to instruct her to use her smartphone camera right then and there to secure the truth. My explicit demand required her to photograph every single piece of legal documentation displayed on my laptop screen to build an impenetrable arsenal of digital evidence. The ultimate directive was for her to take those digital photographs and personally expose the monstrous financial fraud to the rest of the unsuspecting relatives. She needed to become the primary whistleblower within their tightly knit inner circle because the truth would carry significantly more destructive weight coming from a betrayed elder. Helen slowly nodded in complete agreement while wiping away her tears to replace her profound grief with a deeply righteous anger aimed directly at Arthur. She carefully photographed the encrypted screens before gathering her bank receipts and marching out the door to initiate the inevitable collapse of their deceitful empire. That weekend, I sat directly in front of my computer monitor to officially launch the decisive strike against their fraudulent empire. Opening a secure email client allowed me to meticulously draft a highly detailed formal report addressed directly to the University Admissions and Financial Aid Compliance Department. Instead of relying on emotional accusations, I focused entirely on presenting verifiable facts regarding the unauthorized use of my personal credentials to secure student funding. Attaching the official police report case number provided irrefutable legal weight to my claims of federal identity theft orchestrated by the family. The attached documentation clearly illustrated how the pending tuition guarantor application for Fiona was entirely fraudulent from the moment it was digitally submitted without my knowledge. Rather than composing a separate explanatory message for the extended family, I strategically pasted the personal contact information of all 50 relatives present at the Christmas dinner into the blind carbon copy field. This calculated decision ensured that every single person who had been coerced into contributing to the fake scholarship fund would receive the exact same undeniable proof simultaneously. The attachments included the explicit verification that Arthur and Martha had diverted those pooled retirement funds for their own personal expenditures rather than securing any legitimate educational enrollment. Hitting the send button finalized the immediate distribution of the explosive truth to both the highest institutional authority and the deeply manipulated family members. Watching the digital confirmation appear on the screen brought an overwhelming sense of vindication because their carefully constructed narrative was finally disintegrating in real time. It only took a few short minutes for the devastating impact of that single comprehensive email to trigger a frantic reaction from the desperate people who thought they had completely outsmarted me. My mobile device immediately vibrated across the wooden desk with an incoming call from Derek displaying a level of sheer desperation he had never previously exhibited during our entire relationship. Choosing to answer the call allowed me to witness the immediate collapse of his arrogant facade as the severe consequences of his actions crashed down upon him. "What did you just send to the admissions office because you are going to completely ruin Fiona's future with this nonsense?" Derek screamed into the receiver with a noticeably panicked voice. "I only sent the absolute truth, so whoever it ends up ruining is simply no longer my problem," I replied with a completely detached tone before permanently severing the connection. Terminating that pathetic conversation cleared the way for the most critical legal step required to permanently sever my ties to his toxic lineage. I composed a separate professional correspondence specifically directed to my lawyer, requesting the immediate preparation of unilateral divorce proceedings to officially end the relationship. My detailed legal instructions explicitly cited severe financial abuse, along with criminal identity fraud, as the primary grounds for dissolving the marriage without any room for future mediation. Providing my legal counsel with the identical police records guaranteed that Derek would be completely paralyzed during the asset division process. He would eventually have to face the judicial system without any access to the financial resources he had spent years comfortably exploiting. I firmly pressed the power button on my smartphone until the glass screen went entirely black to permanently sever all remaining connections to their incoming chaotic fallout. Tossing the silenced mobile device onto the adjacent fabric sofa represented my final conscious withdrawal from their exhausting web of relentless financial manipulation. I leaned back into my office chair while taking a deep breath of genuine relief as the heavy burden of their financial expectations finally lifted from my shoulders forever. There was absolutely no need for me to actively participate in the impending emotional fallout, because the undeniable documentary evidence I provided would accomplish all the necessary destruction on its own. Sitting in the quiet comfort of my temporary apartment allowed me to peacefully wait while the elaborate system of lies they had selfishly built slowly crushed them under its own massive weight. The following Monday, every single illusion of control previously held by my former in-laws officially collapsed into absolute ruin. The university admissions department dispatched a formally certified electronic letter explicitly revoking Fiona's acceptance status effective immediately due to severe financial application discrepancies. The Institutional Compliance Office discovered the pending criminal investigation attached to her fraudulent guarantor paperwork, triggering their strict zero-tolerance policy regarding academic fraud. That singular administrative action permanently destroyed her unearned opportunity to attend a prestigious academic institution using my stolen financial credentials. Fiona was forced to abruptly cancel her luxurious campus housing reservations while facing the terrifying reality of entering the adult workforce without any marketable skills. Meanwhile, Helen organized a massive physical confrontation by leading dozens of furious relatives directly to the front steps of that extravagant Aspen villa. The deeply betrayed family members aggressively blockaded the snowy driveway while loudly demanding that Arthur immediately return every single dollar they had generously contributed. They completely refused to leave the residential premises until he provided verifiable bank statements proving exactly where their hard-earned retirement savings had actually gone. The neighbors watched in stunned silence as the meticulously crafted wealthy reputation of the household disintegrated right there on the frozen pavement. The incredibly chaotic situation outside the house escalated significantly further when local law enforcement officers officially arrived at the property to interrogate Arthur. Uniformed detectives knocked heavily on the custom wooden door to conduct their preliminary criminal investigation regarding the unauthorized deployment of my federal Social Security number. Securing initial witness statements from the angry crowd standing outside provided the police officers with additional probable cause to heavily scrutinize Martha alongside her husband. The authorities formally requested immediate access to their digital devices to trace the exact origin point of the forged electronic signature submitted to the university. Facing the terrifying reality of federal prison time caused Arthur to completely turn his desperate rage against his own son to shift the blame. Derek was unceremoniously evicted from his childhood home because his parents directly blamed him for failing to successfully manipulate me into withdrawing the active police report. They essentially threw him out into the freezing cold without any financial support, because his utter inability to control my actions had exposed their elaborate criminal enterprise. Having his access to their bank accounts permanently revoked left him wandering the city without a safety net or a place to sleep. Stripped of his luxurious lifestyle, Derek resorted to stalking the public lobby of my corporate office building, hoping to ambush me after my professional shift concluded. I walked out of the secure elevator bank to find him standing near the main reception desk, looking entirely disheveled, while frantically pacing across the marble floor. Seeing me approach the security turnstiles caused him to rush forward with a pathetic expression, attempting to physically block my exit path toward the parking garage. His previously arrogant demeanor had been completely replaced by the terrified desperation of a man finally facing the severe consequences of his own deceit. Lydia, please retract the police report because my parents are going to go to federal prison for this. Derek begged with genuine panic leaking through his trembling voice. They were certainly not afraid of the consequences when they violently threw my dinner plate into the trash, so now it is time to pay the actual price. I replied with absolute coldness, refusing to entertain another single second of his pathetic manipulation. I immediately signaled the corporate building security team to actively intervene on my behalf. Two large uniformed guards swiftly flanked Derek on both sides to physically escort him out, through the revolving glass doors onto the busy metropolitan sidewalk. I stood quietly in the warm lobby watching him frantically bang his fists against the thick exterior glass before I turned around to confidently walk toward my car. Knowing he was entirely powerless to penetrate the secure perimeter of my professional life provided an immense sense of personal satisfaction to end my workday. 2 months later, the notoriously sterile environment of the courthouse mediation room finally severed the last remaining legal connections to that fraudulent family. I sat completely upright at the opposite end of the long mahogany conference table while maintaining a steady gaze directed entirely at Derek. He appeared remarkably disheveled with deep, dark circles under his eyes, having completely lost that arrogant sense of entitlement he previously wore so proudly. During the entire preliminary discussion, he continuously attempted to deflect all personal responsibility by aggressively blaming his parents for orchestrating the catastrophic identity theft. His pathetic attempts to manipulate the narrative fell completely flat because the official criminal police report provided absolute documentation of his direct involvement. My legal counsel methodically presented our comprehensive financial disclosure documents, explicitly detailing how Derek had secretly authorized the fraudulent educational applications using my credentials. The undeniable digital evidence legally empowered my attorney to aggressively pursue a heavily disproportionate division of our marital assets in my favor to recover the stolen marital funds. Derek was systematically forced into accepting a legally binding agreement where he essentially walked away from the marriage with absolutely nothing but his personal clothing. He forfeited all future claims to my corporate retirement accounts, alongside any potential spousal support, because aggressively fighting the divorce would publicly expose his severe financial crimes. You forced my family to sell our home to pay off the relatives while pushing my sister into serving coffee for a living. Derek stated bitterly across the table. You are entirely mistaken because their own monumental greed orchestrated that specific outcome, while I simply refused to continually finance their delusions. I replied with chilling finality. The opposing legal representation officially confirmed the devastating financial reality currently crushing Arthur and Martha during a brief recess outside the mediation room. They were desperately attempting to finalize an emergency short sale on their opulent Aspen villa to rapidly liquidate the asset before the defrauded relatives initiated civil litigation. Sacrificing their primary residence was the only viable strategy to slowly repay the stolen retirement funds, while simultaneously attempting to avoid federal prison sentences for elder fraud. The deeply humiliating process of publicly downsizing to a cramped rental apartment completely destroyed their carefully manufactured social reputation within their wealthy community. Their former friends and elite neighbors permanently severed all contact after discovering the shocking truth regarding the fake scholarship fund they had actively promoted. Fiona experienced the harshest reality check of her entire existence because she permanently lost her unearned opportunity to attend any prestigious university due to the active fraud investigation. Without my professional income to endlessly subsidize her lazy lifestyle, she was abruptly forced to secure immediate employment just to afford her basic daily survival. She currently works grueling full-time shifts at a local chain restaurant, while desperately trying to navigate adulthood without the financial safety net she always took for granted. The golden child was finally forced to directly confront the severe consequences of actively participating in a criminal conspiracy designed to exploit her own sister-in-law. The presiding judge returned to the courtroom to formally review the finalized settlement documents before decisively striking the wooden gavel against the sounding block. That loud, authoritative sound officially dissolved the marriage, while simultaneously ratifying the extremely one-sided asset division, protecting my financial future from any further predatory attacks. I methodically organized my printed documents into a sleek leather briefcase without speaking another word or casting a single glance backward at the completely broken man sitting across from me. Stepping out through the heavy wooden doors of the courthouse into the crisp afternoon air felt like shedding a massive, suffocating weight that had anchored me down for years. 6 months later, I took a slow sip of coffee on the balcony of my new apartment while absorbing the bright, early morning sunlight. Relocating to an entirely different state finally allowed me to experience a genuinely peaceful daily routine without constantly refreshing my banking applications to monitor for unauthorized fraudulent activity. Maintaining absolute control over my professional income completely eliminated the suffocating anxiety of anticipating another devastating financial betrayal from the exact individuals who were supposed to fiercely protect me. Permanently removing those relentless exploiters from my personal universe delivered an overwhelming sense of absolute psychological relief that fundamentally transformed my entire perspective on adult relationships. Waking up every single day without carrying the heavy burden of their manufactured financial crises felt exactly like dropping a massive stone boulder that had been slowly crushing my chest for years. I no longer wasted my valuable emotional energy attempting to satisfy the bottomless demands of a husband who actively prioritized shielding his deceitful parents over securing our mutual future. Replacing the constant screaming matches and manipulative guilt trips with the quiet hum of my new city life proved to be the greatest investment I ever made in my own sanity. The extended relatives who previously supported Arthur during the chaotic initial fallout eventually discovered the undeniable truth regarding the completely fabricated matching scholarship fund. Multiple cousins and aunts desperately attempted to contact me through various social media platforms to offer their deeply belated apologies after fighting to recover portions of their stolen retirement savings. Choosing to permanently ignore their frantic digital messages was a highly calculated decision because their initial willingness to blindly condemn my character demonstrated their inherently toxic nature. I deliberately established an impenetrable boundary, keeping all of those complicated family dynamics entirely outside of my newly constructed peaceful existence. Successfully rebuilding my independence required a completely clean slate, devoid of any lingering connections to the cowardly bystanders who comfortably watched me being publicly cornered without ever intervening. Surrounding myself with genuine friends who never viewed my bank account as a communal asset helped me properly heal from the extensive psychological damage they deliberately inflicted upon me. Watching their elaborate social empire crumble from a safe distance validated my difficult decision to utilize the justice system instead of engaging in endless, pointless arguments. There is a profoundly quiet beauty in designing an independent life, where absolutely nobody expects you to prove your familial loyalty through continuous forced financial sacrifices. Many curious individuals have explicitly asked whether I harbor any lingering regrets about being excessively ruthless toward my former family members during the complex legal proceedings. My honest answer remains absolutely not, because this devastating ordeal taught me that biological connections or marriage certificates never provide a valid license for unchecked financial exploitation. You must never weaponize your own pristine legal identity or sacrifice your exhausting professional labor to blindly guarantee the reckless greed of another manipulative human being. Implementing timely ruthlessness against familial predators and establishing impenetrable steel boundaries should never be misinterpreted by society as acts of inherent cruelty or malicious vengeance. Those firm defensive mechanisms are frequently the absolute only viable methods available to successfully protect your fundamental survival and preserve your personal self-respect against chronic emotional manipulation. Walking away from a toxic environment is rarely a cinematic moment of triumph, but rather a quiet commitment to prioritizing your own mental health over maintaining a destructive illusion. True freedom only begins when you finally stop carrying the heavy consequences of other people's terrible financial decisions upon your own tired shoulders.
Điểm đáng chú ý trong câu chuyện này không chỉ nằm ở việc Lydia rời đi mà còn ở cách cô phản ứng khi bị dồn ép, khi ranh giới cá nhân bị xâm phạm nghiêm trọng. Việc im lặng hoặc nhượng bộ chỉ khiến tình hình trở nên tồi tệ hơn. Đây là một bài học quan trọng trong những vấn đề liên quan đến tài chính và pháp lý. Cảm xúc không phải là công cụ giải quyết hiệu quả, mà chính là bằng chứng và hành động đúng pháp luật. Câu chuyện cũng cho ta thấy một thực tế khác. Nhiều người thân trong gia đình dù ban đầu đứng về phía kẻ gây áp lực, cuối cùng lại quay sang xin lỗi khi sự thật được phơi bày. Tuy nhiên, Lydia đã chọn không quay lại. Điều này đặt ra một câu hỏi rất đáng suy ngẫm: liệu sự hối hận đến muộn có đủ để hàn gắn niềm tin đã bị phá vỡ? Từ toàn bộ diễn biến có thể rút ra một bài học rõ ràng: ranh giới cá nhân không phải là lựa chọn mà là điều bắt buộc. Nếu bạn không tự thiết lập, người khác sẽ dễ dàng vượt qua. Độc lập tài chính là lớp bảo vệ mạnh mẽ nhất. Khi bạn kiểm soát được tiền bạc, bạn cũng sẽ kiểm soát được cuộc sống của mình. Không phải mọi mối quan hệ gia đình đều đáng để giữ bằng mọi giá. Sự tôn trọng phải đến từ hai phía, không phải hy sinh từ một chiều. Pháp luật tồn tại để bảo vệ bạn, hãy sử dụng nó khi cần thiết. Cuối cùng, dù đây chỉ là một câu chuyện hư cấu, nhưng thông điệp của nó lại rất thực tế. Đôi khi sự lạnh lùng không phải là vô cảm, mà là cách duy nhất để bảo vệ bản thân khỏi những tổn thương sâu sắc. Còn bạn thì sao? Nếu rơi vào hoàn cảnh tương tự, bị chính gia đình gây áp lực tài chính và xâm phạm quyền cá nhân, bạn sẽ chọn tha thứ hay cắt đứt hoàn toàn? Hãy chia sẻ quan điểm của bạn, mọi góc nhìn đều đáng được lắng nghe.